Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank you for joining us at this meeting of the National Conservation Council. And I believe first order of business is to call this meeting to order. If our secretary could just confirm we have a quorum.
Yes, sir, we have a quorum. The only person I have apologies from is Lisa Hurlston McKenzie, who is actually at the Climate Change COP global meeting.
Thank you. Next item, declaration of interests. Do any of the members have any particular interest in any of the matters under discussion on the agenda today?
No.
None, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. Next item is the minutes of the last meeting.
So, Mr. Chairman, these minutes were circulated to members previously. It's just the minutes of the 23rd August 2023 general meeting.
Mr. Chair, I would propose that we accept the minutes as drafted and corrected. I think we all have the corrected version in front of us, so I would propose.
Thank you. Does anyone second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Patricia. And any objections? No, the minutes are passed. Matters arising from previous minutes, the agenda says none.
There were none that I noticed, sir, that needed to be touched on.
And then item number 4, reports. Climate change, I believe that's Lisa Hurlston. She's not present.
Tim Austin on that committee was going to give the report for Lisa.
Thank you, Mrs. All right, I will read briefly the report that Lisa Hurlston McKenzie has prepared as chair of the Climate Change Committee. You mentioned previously Lisa is off at the COP28 in Dubai, the climate change meeting there. So members will have in front of them hopefully the working paper 02 or 1, 2 it is, I think. So I won't propose to read the whole thing. I'll just highlight the main items for those online and for people that probably haven't seen the full document. It starts with it's basically a report of all of the activities in 2023. We start with the draft climate change policy. Most of the members will be well aware that the climate change risk assessment was completed in 2022, which went a long way to informing the previous draft of the climate change policy. That has now gone out through a lot of work, public consultation, extensive public consultation, and I think has been revised following that consultation and is now with Cabinet awaiting a decision. So we look forward to hearing about that. Just to add that the Ministry has also been working really hard to integrate some of the recommendations into the approved national food and nutrition security policies. That's good to see integration across the board. She then goes on to report some of the activities that the chair has been up to, particularly dealing with the participation in the Spectrum 2023 conference in Cayman in September 2023, which was around shaping financial services. The National Trust were instrumental in introducing a short film called Save Our Wild Isles, Banking on a Wilder Tomorrow, which explored the relationship between financial and economic systems and biodiversity loss and what can be done to reduce the impact. Lisa then sat on a panel following that movie or that film and discussed a lot of the ESG, which is environmental, social and governance factors that might be of use in the financial sector and how they might relate to Cayman. Much more detail is provided in the report I've listed there. She then goes on to detail the progress that's made towards the UK's ratification of the Paris Agreement extension to the Cayman Islands. Climate Change Committee members have been part of the ministry-led technical group, which is engaged with the UK's Department for Energy and Security and Net Zero, looking at possibly extending this agreement to the Cayman Islands. And a final decision now rests with Cabinet, which we're hoping may be one of the announcements that made at the COP28 UK pavilion in Dubai. So fingers crossed for that. She then goes on to mention some of the preparations towards attending the UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai. Part of that, along with the Department of Environment, she prepped the youth delegation that the National Trust Sustainable Cayman have been supporting in attending. So some of you may have seen a lot of the excitement around that with those young folks at the conference. She also mentioned that she will be part of, Lisa is actually, as we've talked about, she'll be part of some of the committees and sitting on some of the kind of roundtable discussions, one particular climate finance and solutions to loss and damage in small islands, very relevant to Cayman. So we look forward to hearing her progress when she gets back from that. And that concludes the report as I have it from her today. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tim. And next on the agenda is the Environmental Assessment Boards. You're dealing with that, Gina?
Yes, I am. So thank you, Mr. Chair. At the moment, the Environmental Assessment Boards are looking at 7 EIAs in total. The East-West Arterial, the Integrated Solid Waste Management System EIA, 3 separate EIAs for the Airports Authority, 1 in each of the islands. There is a quarry application and the Port Zeus Marina on the BRAC. So starting with the ISWMs, we are fairly close to finalizing the environmental statement. On the ISWMs EIA, we are waiting for our updated report from the consultants on the hydrology studies that were conducted. They had to go back to the modeling and to redo some modeling. So we are due to have a presentation from GHD, who are the consultants on this EIA, on Monday, this coming Monday. And hopefully we can finalize that document shortly thereafter. On the East-West Arterial EIA, that continues to progress. The EAB meets as part of the steering group every other week with the EIA consultants, and those meetings have been going generally very well. We have received 1 chapter from the EIA on the cultural and heritage assessments. The EAB has reviewed that chapter and has given its feedback to the consultant, so we're hoping to get a revised draft of that chapter in due course. The holdup with the EIA at the moment is due to the fact that the hydraulics and hydrology study, which was commissioned by the NRA outside of the EIA process, has not yet been completed. So we've been waiting on this study, I think since February. I reported to Council that we were told at that time that it was 90% complete, but we still haven't had the final documentation. So the consultants, the EIA consultants, are waiting for that report, but the NRA are also requiring that report in order to do the design for the road. So even if there was no EIA, that report would still be required, and they don't have it yet. So it's from our perspective, it's on track. We've done everything that we have been required to do, and we're just waiting for that hydrology and hydraulics report, which will feed into the assessments that they need to do in order to come up with their preferred option for the route of the road. On the airports applications, Council set, for example, you established EABs for all of the airports projects last in August. So we have now prepared scoping opinions for the Cayman BRAC and the Little Cayman airports, and they have gone to the Airports Authority. The Grand Cayman scoping opinion has been drafted, and it's out for review by EAB members and will be sent out, if it hasn't already been, to the Airports Authority shortly. The Croc Quarry has also been issued a scoping opinion, and we are waiting for them to come forward with the suggestions for their consultants who can carry out the work. The Port Zeus Marina, we've reviewed terms of reference, draft terms of reference, and fed back on those. They are taking the comments of the EAB into account. We'll hopefully get finalized terms of reference fairly shortly. That's where we are at with the EIAs.
Thank you. And moving on, new matters. I see fish pots, 2-pot limit.
Yes, sir. That I will take that if I may. Council, or most people will recall that historically there was a limitation of 2 fish pots per household in the fish pot licensing system. This was to limit commercial people from fishing pots commercially. This was from the old Marine Conservation Board at the time. When the rules changed from the Marine Conservation to the National Conservation Act and regulations and directives, the exact wording of that was lost, partly because it was also a very inefficient restriction, very hard to tell when someone was part of a household or not. DOE, though, has seen an uptick in persons asking for multiple pots, so we have put together a proposal to, again, limit fish pots to 2 tagged pots per person, and only the 2 tagged pots they're licensed to use. So this isn't a significant change from the current and previous practice of people being able to get 2 fish pots, but not fish loads of pots. However, this new system we hope is more enforceable and gives us a chance to clean up the directives regarding tags being legally required on fish pots, although we have been using them for many years. So that is the proposal that we are putting to Council for your consideration today.
Thank you. So do we need to have a vote on this?
Yes, sir. Council will need to consider it and vote yes, sir.
Would you like to?
Unfortunately, I can't move it. I can read the I can read a draft motion if that would Council would like.
I can move have you got the draft motion already drafted, John B., or do I need to do this on the fly?
I have one in the agenda, so it's on the. I can read it. I have a bigger screen if you'd like.
Miss Seymour has moved
I've
it.
got it. I got it.
Oh, sorry.
I so move that you cited 2 fish pots, and whatever your terminology is. I didn't get all of it, but I so moved that we should have 2 fish pots and be very, scrutinize it very well.
I second the motion.
Thank you.
And could we have a vote on that, please?
So can I just clarify from a motion perspective that we're also proposing that these changes be incorporated into the National Conservation Council license and permit directives? So I would just move that the amendments to the directives, which were sent out in working paper 3, be accepted and enacted and promulgated.
I give consent to that.
Thank you.
Seconded.
All right, with that amendment, could we have a vote on that?
Aye.
Aye.
And online members, yes?
6.
All eyes.
Tim Austin, aye.
Okay.
All eyes.
As everyone
You know,
says.
Okay, thank you.
Aye.
So moving on,
Yes, sir.
the SEBRAC Conservation Agreement. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I hope so, sir. That's the same wording I use for pronunciation. So, if I may, Seabrack, sorry. Seabrack is Coast to Bluff Recreational Access and Conservation Group, or NGO. They have as a goal and intention of purchasing and protecting land, particularly on Cayman Brack. They have 2 pieces of land that they would like to propose to the council to become conservation areas, or to enter into conservation agreement with, to make them protected areas. DOE has looked at them and suggests to council that they meet the requirements, biological requirements, if you will, for conservation, suitable for conservation. Seabrack, so before, however, you can enter into conservation agreement, you obviously have to own the land. Seabrack is in the process of purchasing these properties, has entered into purchase agreements, but are requesting a duty waiver from the financial secretary to purchase the land for conservation purposes. The financial secretary has asked for them for some guarantee that the land is for conservation when they consider the duty waiver. So Seabrack wrote and asked the council for a letter and to that effect, and gave a proposed draft conservation agreement. DOE is proposing an MOU between Seabrack and the council based on that draft, and Seabrack has agreed to this. If entered into by both Seabrack and the council, this will hopefully give the financial secretary the surety that they want, so they can then consider the duty-free transfer for Seabrack, who, when the transfer goes through and is purchased, the MOU would bind Seabrack and the council to negotiate and enter on the conservation agreement. Obviously, what this MOU nor council can do is bind Cabinet's future decision, because that's the final decision on making the conservation agreement, since it would be between Seabrack and the Cabinet. But it does set up as much guarantee as we think either Seabrack and the council can give to each other, and that this will go to a conservation agreement. Just for reference, obviously nothing in the conservation agreement would override species conservation plans or other laws that are on the books, but it would manage and govern what happens on this conservation area, which would become a protected area under the law.
Okay, thank you. And this is in sorry, did I hear somebody wanted to speak?
I said, do we have to agree to it?
Yes, ma'am. We would suggest that council.
Asking. Yes, I would like to say that based on what John said, we agree with it only if the MOU is carried out as written. And they are a charity, you said. They become a charity.
Yes, ma'am, they are. They are a registered NGO.
Good. Well, I so agree.
So I think what John is looking for is for the council to authorize the chairman to sign the MOU on the council's behalf.
I so agree on that.
Thank you, Ms. Lucille. Do we have somebody second that?
I second.
That's Patricia seconds. Thank you. And vote?
Yes.
In favor.
Here.
Yep, in favor.
Okay.
Tim Austin online, yes, in favour.
I abstain, Mr. Chair. That's Richard.
Thank you.
Aye, I'm in favour.
Thank you. So that's carried. The next item on the agenda is Section 41 Guidance Notes.
Mr. Chair, I'll take this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So council members will recall that in 2015, council issued guidance notes on the process for consultation that needed to be adhered to by entities who were contemplating any action that could have an adverse impact, any action or decision or undertaking that could have an adverse impact on the environment generally, and also on protected areas and the critical habitat of a protected species. Subsequent to the judgment, the Court of Appeal judgment, it has become necessary for us to amend those guidance notes to clarify nothing in terms of the triggers for consultation, but the process which we follow with entities who are consulting. And essentially, what the judgment said was that the council and the DOE on behalf of the council would respond to a Section 41(3) consultation first, and then if it was determined that there could or would likely be an impact on a protected area, an adverse impact in a protected area or the critical habitat of a protected species, then the entity was obligated to seek the approval of council under Section 41(4) of the Act for what they are proposing to do. So what the judgment has said is that we cannot preemptively issue directions as mitigation measures or a direction to refuse an application before we issue our Section 41(3) and the entity who's asked for the consultation receives that, the DOE's review on behalf of the NCC. They then have to come back to the NCC and seek the approval. So it's purely an administrative process issue that we're correcting. In so doing, what we have done is we have also called out in the actual guidance notes sections of the law that are relevant. We have reminded everybody that really this starts from our Constitution, the requirement to consult before entities make decisions that could have an impact in the environment. Our Constitution order contains a list of affirmations at the start of the document, and one of them says that we are a country that respects, protects, and defends its environment and natural resources as the basis of its existence. And then in the Bill of Rights, which follows the affirmations in the Constitution, Section 18 of the Bill of Rights notes that government shall, in all its decisions, have due regard to the need to foster and protect an environment that is not harmful to the health or well-being of present and future generations, while promoting justifiable economic and social development. To this end, government should adopt reasonable legislative and other measures to protect the heritage and wildlife and the land and sea biodiversity of the Cayman Islands that A, limit pollution and ecological degradation, B, promote conservation and biodiversity, and C, secure ecologically sustainable development and use of natural resources. And the point is that Section 41 of our Act, of the National Conservation Act, is really at its core the legislative embodiment of this constitutional provision from a sustainability perspective, because it requires consultation on the environment with the NCC, and the DOE, as you know, has that delegated authority before entities give any undertakings or any permissions or take any decisions that could have an adverse effect on the environment. So that's really the foundation of Section 41 and why it's in our Act. Essentially, nothing in the guidance notes has changed in relation to the triggers for consultation. So the old guidance notes had 3 sets of triggers. They had a location trigger, they had a project type trigger, and then there was a strategic trigger for national policies and plans, etc. Those remain exactly the same. They have not been touched or amended, so there's no increase in the remit of the council and the DOE in terms of those triggers that we are suggesting through the guidance notes are the triggers for where we think entities could be getting into a situation where they might be contemplating something that could or would likely have an impact, an adverse effect on the environment. So everything essentially remains the same, other than we're calling out, as I mentioned, for example, on page 3 of the new guidance notes, the entirety of section 41 is written in the guidance notes. The old guidance notes had a link to the law. And the duty to consult with the council under section 41(3) of the Act is obviously spelled out in these new guidance notes as well. And like I said, everything else remains the same. So what my recommendation to council is today is that we approve these guidance notes for gazetting at the earliest convenience of the secretary, who can get them to the Gazette office. So that's what I recommend to council, and I guess I will move a motion that the guidance notes be adopted as amended, and that the DOE on council's behalf basically promulgate the guidance notes and have discussions with entities under our directive, under our delegated authority.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you. That's
Second.
Ian, thank you. And can we have a vote on that?
I
Patricia?
support the resolution.
In favor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I consent.
I'm going to
In favor.
abstain on this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Because I was quite involved in this process.
I also abstain, Mr. Chair. That's Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
I vote in favour. I feel I am suitably far enough removed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that carries then. So next on our agenda is renewal of old spear gun licenses.
Yes, sir, I will present this one if I
Sure.
can. In 2016, council approved renewing spare gun licenses issued from 12 September 2014 onwards, provided that all the normal criteria were met, such as the person still possessing their spare gun, a clean police record, etc. That date of 12 September 2014 was when the relevant section of the National Conservation Act came into force, and so council felt that was the earliest date that they could legally issue licenses for. During subsequent discussions about spare gun licensing procedures, a 2015 cutoff date was suggested, and the DOE erroneously began using that date. So we are asking council to please reconfirm the approval to renew those licenses from 2014 to 2015, provided all the normal criteria are met. We do believe that there's some of the people who would still want to renew because they've asked us, and DOE will contact the 32 persons who are potentially eligible in that time period to let them know that we've got the reconfirmation that we can start issuing those licenses, renewing those licenses.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I speak?
I'm sorry, could Ms. Lucille, could
May I
you say that
speak?
again?
May I speak?
She's wanting to speak.
May you speak? Yes, Ms. Lucille, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, not many people know that I have been a long spare gun user because I worked in the Bronx in my young days and learned how to spare fish. And I was able to discern the fish I wanted and went for it. When I came home to Grand Cayman, and then the hurricane came, the one in 2005. I had my spare gun in my living room, and the sand came in and stuck the spare gun so hard on a mountain of what I would call cement, and it never could come out. And when I went to have my license renewed, they said I could not renew my license without a spear gun. I have been in sympathy all my life with this movement, and I've used spear guns. I use them well, I know how to use them, and I've caught the fish I wanted. So I'm in support of it, of the change and the agreement to open it up, providing we follow all the rules.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want us to vote? Do we need to vote?
I believe we do need to vote on this.
So we need to move a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else want to move it?
I so do move the motion. And I hope that council will reconsider.
Need to state the motion?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You seconded?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I thought you did, sorry.
No, I just wondered if we needed to state the motion.
Well, I can read it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That the proposed resumption of relicensing spear guns last renewed between 12th September 2014 and 30th September 2015 be accepted. That's it. And we had Ms. Lucille move that and Ian second.
Yes.
And vote.
Tricia.
That's Ms. Patricia voted for,
And in favor.
and Ian in favor.
I'm going to abstain because I was also involved in these discussions.
Thank you. Anybody else? Frank? Our online membership?
I agree.
I support.
I consent.
Thank you.
I support the motion.
Thank you.
Apologies. Tim Austin, Mr. Chair, I will abstain in this instance, assuming we have enough people to vote.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Just lost my screen.
What happened to the motion, sir?
Okay. So next item on the agenda
What
is,
happened to the motion, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, Ms. Lucille, could you say again?
Did it pass? Did the motion pass?
Yes, it did pass, Ms. Lucille.
Oh, yes.
And moving on then, the next item on the agenda is the Seabird Species Conservation Plan and Consultation Report.
So, sir, I will take that one if I may. I apologize to have to. Just got away from me for a second. So this is something that has been a little while in coming to the council. It is a draft species conservation plan for colonial nesting seabirds. It groups these 6 species of birds together because they have similar conservation needs, so it's a bit more efficient than doing it separately. They all nest colonially, which means that some of the necessary protection has to be area-based to get these large nesting conglomerations, and we propose to do that using designated critical habitat. Now, where their critical habitat is already protected land, it's already in a protected area, it's pretty easy. However, some of this will be on private land, and so we understand whatever we propose has to be fair to both the landowners as well as the seabirds. Now, as many people know, around the world, seabirds who nest in these colonies are very susceptible to habitat loss and alien species predation. So this plan tries to give us the tools to begin to address both of these issues locally. We have beautified the report and the draft plan somewhat since the agenda was circulated. So they now all look like the executive summary that was published. And we're going to ask council to just approve these prettier versions because we think they'll look better as a package, but the content has not materially changed from what was sent out. All the content and particularly the rules proposed in the management plan, nothing has changed. We've just altered how they look, so that they all now have a more colorful appearance. And sorry, I was having a moment of technical difficulty again.
So is the motion then just to accept the changes?
You know, the motion will be to accept the motion when council comes to it will be to accept both the consultation report and the draft conservation plan, and to pass that then along to cabinet with council's, we would suggest with council's intention that the plan come into force if you know, depending on whatever cabinet feeds back and says. I believe the wording, the actual proposed wording would be that the updated draft plan and consultation report are submitted to the ministry for the approval of the cabinet, and that the draft plan shall be adopted and come into force 60 days from the date of submission to the ministry. If within that period of 60 days from the date of submission of the council does not receive written notice from the cabinet setting out reasons why the plan as submitted should not be adopted. That basically reflects the wording of section 17(6) of the Act, is why it sounds a bit funny. And I can go through what is actually being proposed. I just apologize to all members that I'm not getting the material to show properly on the screen. For,
There we are.
I don't know why.
It is.
Moved
So
on.
it's, yeah. So starting with bridal terns, they only nest on Big Key in Barkers. So we're proposing that to become the critical habitat, which would be 200 feet. So obviously the key itself, and then 200 feet from the shoreline, so as not to spook the birds. And it would mean no disturbance from May 1st to July 31st when the birds are nesting there. This area sits within a marine reserve, so there's already no fishing there, which means very few people go there for any, just for sightseeing. And so as long as they don't disturb the birds, they could still go into the area, but during May 1st to July 31st, no disturbance of the birds. The next group are the least terns. Now these birds are in slightly greater numbers than the last ones and more mobile. They nest in a few different areas around Grand Cayman. But the main nesting is on Vital Cay in South Sound.
No, Vital K is in Barkers, so we need to just say South.
Sorry, South Sound Key,
Yes.
where the picture is. I do apologize, we got the wording wrong.
No, he,
Yeah.
he got
The Sand Key in South Sound, sorry.
Yes.
That is where we're proposing to be the critical habitat. Again, 200 feet from the shoreline so as not to spook the birds, but also the island, the key itself, from May 1st to August 31st. This particular area has been proposed to Cabinet as a protected area by Council already. Cabinet has accepted that. We are just awaiting the final order to go through with Cabinet approval for this area to actually become a protected area anyway. So again, there should not be any significant impact from this critical habitat designation or the protection of the birds. Again, the particular point is during their nesting season. The rest of the time, the critical habitat would not really impact people's ability to use the key. The red-footed boobies and the man-o'-wars, their main or only nesting site is the Booby Pond Ramsar site in Little Cayman. Obviously, this has already been protected for many, many decades now. It is in fact the Cayman Islands' only Ramsar site because of these birds nesting there, particularly the booby birds, recognizing that it is probably the biggest nesting colony of these birds in the Western Hemisphere. But again, it's a protected area, so we don't need to propose any new specific protections for these birds. As a protected area already, the booby pond will eventually receive a management plan through council, which will naturally pay a lot of attention to what do the nesting birds that this protected area is named for and created for, what do they need. The tropic birds, bosun birds, is the next group, and this is where we start getting into some perhaps slightly more contentious issues. They nest on the Pedro Cliffs and the Brack Bluff, and again we are proposing that for their critical habitat there should be no disturbance. That proposed critical habitat is in Pedro. It is essentially the Pedro Cliffs as shown on the map. During the public consultation that occurred, we'll propose the Pedro Cliffs, and also we might as well mention the Brack Bluff Edge as well at the same time on the north and south coast, or sort of the northeast and southeast sides of the bluff. And we're proposing, again, just generally let's call it no disturbance of the nesting habitat. We had also initially proposed a section east of Pedro, or east of Beach Bay, where historic nesting used to occur, but we would like to pull that recommendation back from council in recognition that there's no actual nesting there now, although we still think it's suitable habitat for the birds, and in recognition of the objections from both islands by landowners of critical habitat on their property, which we fully understand, but we are proposing it still because it is a way to protect the birds. What we're proposing is the cliff faces, or the bluff face, as well as the top sort of 50-foot back from the cliff edge of the properties in that critical habitat. The birds nest either on the face of the cliff or on the top there, or sometimes in little caves that will go from the cliff face up to the top. Along Pedro, that 50-foot setback is already the planning setback for cliffs and iron shore and stuff like that in Grand Cayman, and there's not a huge amount of vegetation on that in that section because of the winds. On Cayman Brack, the vegetation comes much closer, comes right up to the edge sometimes, and tall, full-size trees. And so we recognize that over there, in particular, people will want to have sight lines out from their properties, why they want to have that nice, beautiful spot on the edge of the bluff. So we are proposing that within that area, hand clearing be allowed outside of the nesting area, the nesting period. The idea is basically to try and find a way for people to be able to still have their home in their view, and the birds can still have their home in their view. On both islands, one of the issues with the critical habitat will be the need to not have alien species in there disturbing the birds. This means things like rats and green iguanas, but also roaming pets like cats or dogs. This is an imposition on some of the landowners, we know, but it is something that we feel we have to recommend and require because the animals are just too disturbing for these birds, and their numbers are getting so very low that sort of every nest counts to an extent. And just the disturbance alone can put these birds off of their nests, and then we lose a nest for the year, and the numbers are way, way down from what they used to be. The last set of birds are the brown boobies. They nest on Cayman Brack. There is some nesting along the south coast of Cayman Brack, but very sporadic. Their main nesting is along the top end of the bluff and down on Long Beach. Going back to 1983, there were 170 nesting pairs recorded, and that was already way down from what the sort of historic, or not historic, but the historic numbers that people talked about seeing were at. By 2001, they were down to 61 pairs. In 2019, 46 pairs remain. We've done counts more recently, numbers are still way down. So we're proposing, again, critical habitat at the top of the bluff and down onto Long Beach. The top of the bluff, again, is the face of the bluff and 50 feet back. Now, on the BRAC, there's no 50-foot planning setback. That section of the Planning Act regulations does not apply over there, but it is very often applied by the DCP as a matter of best practice. The Development Control Board of Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, and obviously it makes up one of the DOE's standard recommendations for anyone building on the cliff. So we hope that it will, that this will just support those actions by the DCB of keeping that top 50 feet as natural as possible while still allowing the people who build inside of it to enjoy the view. Up here in particular, though, on this top part of the bluff, we don't have the same issue of big trees right up to the edge because there's just too much wind normally. The Long Beach section of the proposed critical habitat is actually more like the two keys on Grand Cayman, is that it's low, sort of flat rubble area. The birds nest in a much wider zone, and so we're proposing 150 feet back from the water line, from the shoreline. The birds nested throughout this area there down on Long Beach, and so it needs to be that size to preserve their nesting area. That landowner has lodged his strong objection because obviously he feels it will reduce the economic developability of his property to build there. Again, it's a bit more of a setback than would normally be required by planning, but that is a very windswept area of the coast with a lot of boulders basically thrown up by storms over the years. And it's where the birds are. So we have to propose to you all that it be considered as a critical habitat because it is critical to the birds on Cayman Brac. Just general note about rock climbers. Obviously the two Cayman Brac critical habitat areas, there is rock climbing occurring. We recognize that as a key user group. There are other groups in some of the cliff areas, fishers using some of the Pedro area, or just people walking trails for recreation. Example, on Cayman Brac, the Lighthouse Trail at the top of the bluff. But we feel that most of that use is light enough and dispersed enough that there's no particular user group that we have to address, but the climbers are a key user group, which we have to recognize. What we are proposing is that climbing require a permit in the critical habitat only. That's the only part that we're worried about with the birds, if you will. This is very similar to what they're already doing now, where the climbing community themselves sort of self-regulate and will close certain routes when they recognize there's birds on it. We're very appreciative of that. But we do recognize that in the future, we could have visiting climbers, visiting groups, new groups starting up locally, new individuals who may not be as respectful of the birds as the current ones, who really do see themselves as the protectors of these birds also. Hence why we propose moving to a permitting system. It would need to be responsive to the needs of the users, 2-year permits, probably any local individual or entity who climbs and would be able to get their permit. But what it would let us do is, as we find nests on those critical habitats, or indeed as the climbers report them, we then would have the ability to report to the permit holders, there's a nest here, this spot is closed to climbing. So basically the same system they're doing now, just more formalized. I'm not going to say that anybody is happy that they have to get a permit for anything. But again, we're suggesting this is what is needed for the birds going forwards to make sure that the current system that is working continues to work if and when new people come in. Just a mention about the consultation itself. We had meetings on the top of the bluff and at Pedro. We reached out to landowners, to the elected representatives in the districts where the critical habitat is proposed, all the usual mass media outreach as well that we could do. We had 80% respondents supported the draft plan, and that was before we put in place our suggested changes based upon the feedback. I'm not saying that necessarily the people who had a philosophical objection to it would change their mind, but we did try to take into account as much as we felt we could their feedback. So that is the consultation report and the draft conservation plan that we are proposing to the council.
Okay, thank you. So just before we put this to council for the vote, I just want to clarify, on the beginning of your presentation, there was some confusion regarding the key names.
Yes.
Parker's Key, which is Vital Key, and South Sound Key. Is that part of the actual?
No, that was
document?
just in my PowerPoint.
Okay, so
Yes.
all right, on that basis then, could I have somebody propose?
I propose.
Patricia proposes that council accept,
I'd like to second it.
and, okay, thank you, and Ian seconds that.
Can I make a short statement in support of this?
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
From a heritage standpoint, particularly the brown booby has been a very important bird historically in the BRAC, and it's terrible to see it in such diminishing numbers, and I fully support our efforts to try to preserve them on the basis of not only their environmental importance, but also their historic and heritage importance to that community.
Thank you. Do we have some more votes?
Mr. Chair, just as a question of elucidation, sir, and for my benefit, what about the bird that comes here, the tall beak that goes to the East End and he goes to West Bay Beach, the pelican?
The pelican doesn't breed here.
The pelican.
So, Ms. Lucille, Patricia is saying it doesn't
Just asking a
breed here?
question. Doesn't breed here?
No.
It only comes occasionally. It may winter or it comes at different times, but it isn't a breeding bird, it isn't resident.
Okay.
So could we just finalize the
Yes.
vote?
Do we need to restate the motion? I'm happy to do it, or you can do it, Mr. Chair.
If you would like to restate it,
I
that'd be
think it's
great.
just so that it's clear. I'm just going to restate the motion that the updated draft plan and consultation report for the Seabird Species Conservation Plan be accepted, and that in keeping with Section 17(6) of the Act, the updated draft plan and consultation report are submitted to the Ministry for the approval of Cabinet, and that the draft plan shall be adopted and come into force 60 days from the date of submission to the Ministry. If within that period of 60 days from the date of submission, Council does not receive written notice from Cabinet setting out reasons why the plan is submitted, should not be adopted.
Thank you.
I support it.
In favor.
Thank you.
The consent.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to abstain because I was heavily involved in the drafting process, so.
Right, oh, thank you.
I abstain, Mr. Chair. That's Richard.
Thank you.
Jim Austin online. I vote in favour of it.
Thank you.
I support the motion. Steve Rodwell.
Thank you.
Lucille did.
So the motion is carried. Next item on the agenda is next meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, proposing for Council's 2024 meetings, 27th of March, 19th of June, 11th September, and 4th December. These are all Wednesdays, and again, 2 p.m. broadcast live on the DOE YouTube.
Thank you. And no discussion on that. The next item is any other business? Would any member like to bring any other business? In that case, I think we have reached the adjournment of our meeting.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to say one thing I just remembered. December 13th is actually 10 years since the National Conservation Act was passed. So I just wanted to remind members that there is the anniversary of the passage of the Act, the 10th anniversary coming up on the 13th of December. And just to say that I think collectively we can be proud of what we've accomplished under the Act so far.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.